Now, the development of both these sides is going to be important in terms of transforming really the way the American society looks. You're going to have a change in inner cities. You're going to have change down south with the slaves. Inner city wise, you're going to have a mass migration of immigrants into America. This is going to be a big key factor in factories when on-skilled labor is an important piece to this. So number wise, we're looking at, in 1820, New York was the only city that had over 100,000 people in it. In 1850, six American cities, right? So, of course, of 30 years, you grow five American cities that now have over 100,000 people in it. So, just a mass swell of people that are coming into society. A lot of this is going to be beneficial, but at the same time, it's going to be harmful. The more people you have, the more factories that can be built, the more you can produce, the more money your country can make. But at the same time, you have to think about who's coming into that society. We know in modern day times there's some pushback against immigrants, and that was true back then as well. The Irish and the Germans were a mass or a more popular group that's going to come in during this time period, but they both kind of had their drawbacks. The Irish were seen as kind of lower class, dirty, troublesome, uneducated, and there was a significant pushback against them, particularly in northern factories. These higher class northern workers saw the Irish as really no different from being African American. They were treated very similar. They were blackballed, they were blacklisted, they were pushed away, and there's a lot of negativity towards the Irish. The Germans, a large amount of them coming in were Jewish and Catholic. A large majority of Americans at this time was Protestant. So the Germans were seen as, not really any different than Native Americans. Here's a group of people that are not Protestant. They're not as close to God. It goes back to the city upon a hill, right? If you are not the group that's chosen by God in the mind of this mass people, you're looked down upon. Nativism was high during this time period. You have a high period of nationalism, but you have a high period of nativism. The more pride that you have in a country, a lot of times that pride is being pushed by groups, and these groups don't like a group that challenges what they have built. Another big piece of this is while people aren't happy within the factories, you're going to start to see unions, right? People are going to come together and they're going to argue for more pay, better working conditions. And these lower class people were pushing back against the unfair treatment that they saw. Unions were illegal until the 1840s. That didn't stop people from attempting to unionize. The issue with unions within a company is it's going to divide the country, or going to divide the company. The workers are happy with the bosses don't trust the workers, and there's going to create problems with peaceful kind of conditions within the workforce. So up until 1840, we're not going to see any legalizing of unions, but there's still going to be kind of an attempt to fight for better working conditions and wages. Again, this is sort of connected to what's happening down south. You have slaves during this time period where the North is kind of starting to push away from slavery. 1777, Vermont is the first state that is going to kind of officially declare slavery gone when they sign their state constitution. You're going to see slavery kind of exist here and there in some of these other states up north. A lot of them are going to pass sort of a grandfather clause, if you will, with slavery, even though that's a sort of a different time. But there are a lot of slaves that were born in these northern states with an enslaved mother would stay slaves for the first 28 years of their life, and then they were granted their independence. So while we think of the North as kind of forward thinking, that wasn't necessarily the case in the early 1800s, where they were going to be granted their freedom, but they were still going to have 28 years of servitude while they're doing this. Down south, slavery is expanding. You're going from about 750,000 slaves in the early 1800s or late 1700s up into about 1.3 million in the mid 1800s, right? So over the course of about 30, 40 years post-American Revolution, you're actually increasing slaves almost double, about 700, 800,000 slaves. And that's all because of the fact that the production factors are working much more quickly because these inventions are being created in the Industrial Revolution up north. And while a lot of northern people are pushing back against slavery, or at least that's what we are kind of led to believe, really without the relationship of the North and the South working together, both sides would have struggled during this time period, up to the point where these textile mills, where cotton is a key kind of component to, almost 100, but I think it's 88 out of 106 American corporations, textile mills, were valued at over $100,000 in 1832. Right, so in the early 1800s, you've got these massive, successful textile mills, which is really kind of moving America forward. It's making America a player on the world stage. But this is without not if you don't have slaves. Another problem with the Industrial Revolution, we tend to think of the 1820s. We're going to get to the era of feelings in a second, but we tend to think it as a positive thing, and it works. But whenever you have a factory system, just like a slave system, you're going to have classes, right? And in the northern factories, you have the rich, wealthy business owners. You have the middle class people that are overseeing stuff, and you have the poor people. And the poor people at this point in time, their children have to work. They're not making enough money, so children are not going to school. They're working in factories in these dangerous conditions for low pay wages. The middle class, the wealthy, because they don't want to be seen on the same level as these impoverished, they're going to school. And it's creating this cycle where initially you think that you have the chance to sort of rise up throughout society, but that's not the case, because of these lower class individuals are seeing their parents work in factories. That's all they've known, and that's all they've ever done when they're little kids and they follow their parents. The upper class kids are not having to work. They're going to school, they're getting educated, and it's creating the endless cycle of those children that are working in factories when they're young. They're going to work in factories when they're older, and they're going to have children that are going to work in factories because they can't get out of this poverty. And the upper class children who are going to get this fine education are going to become the business owners because they've had the capability or the ability to do so during this time period. The communication and transportation revolution during this time period was big. You're starting to see the ability of people to transport stuff with the Industrial Revolution. So Robert Fulton comes in during this time period with the Clermont. Robert Fulton is going to produce the first kind of commercial steam engine, where people are able to actually travel on boat. At this point in time, it was the Navy, it was some transportation, but now you actually have civilians that are able to travel. In condition to that, you're actually encouraging trade within the states, right? No longer are you trading, just overseas. You're able to trade within the states because of railroads, but also these boats, right? Because you're going to build canals at this point in time, the most famous one being the Erie Canal, right? And this is going to allow kind of man-made waterway passages that are going to allow people to trade and really kind of build that internal American system. Railroads, we said, are also kind of this big play in the system, where people are able to transport kind of quicker, faster, more over the course of railroads. From a communication standpoint, you have Sam Morse is going to create the telegraph, right? As people are moving out to other areas, they're expanding, American expansion after the War of 1812, you have to figure out how it can communicate, whether it's war, whether it's with someone whether it's a government official. So the telegraph is going to become an important piece as Americans start to expand. The National Road in 1811 is probably the last kind of major component to this. It's going to expand from Maryland out to Illinois, eventually kind of towards West Virginia. But this is kind of the first piece of land, this first road, where again, American transportation, the idea that we actually can expand as an American society.